Marcus was 68 years old when he realized he'd lived someone else's life. 43 years as an accountant. A job he never wanted. In a career he never chose. Building a life that looked successful to everyone except the person living it. He sat in his backyard on a Saturday morning, coffee going cold in his hands, staring at nothing. His wife was inside watching television. His kids were grown, living in other cities, calling once a month out of obligation. And Marcus felt nothing. Not sadness, not regret, just the devastating emptiness of a man who had spent 7 decades breathing, but had never actually lived. Here's what nobody tells you. Most people die at 25 and aren't buried until 75. They make one decision, usually in their early 20s, about who they're supposed to be, and they spend the rest of their lives defending that decision, even as it slowly kills them from the inside. The system is designed this way, not through conspiracy, but through convention. You're born into a world with pre-written scripts. Go to school, get good grades, choose a stable career, buy a house, get married, have kids, retire, die. And if you follow the script, you're rewarded with approval. Your parents are proud. Your friends are impressed. Society nods in recognition. You've done it right. But here's the question nobody asks. Right according to whom? And for what purpose? Marcus didn't choose accounting. Accounting chose him. He was good at math. His father was an accountant. And in 1976, when Marcus graduated college, stable career meant more than fulfilling life. He told himself he'd do it for a few years, save money, then pursue what he actually wanted. But years became decades. The salary increased, the mortgage demanded payment, the kids needed braces, and slowly, imperceptibly, the temporary plan became a permanent prison. By 40, Marcus had stopped thinking about what he wanted. By 50, he'd forgotten he was allowed to want anything. By 60, he'd become the role so completely he couldn't remember who existed before it. This is how 95% of humanity lives. Not in active misery, but in passive resignation. They wake up tired resignation. They wake up tired, go to jobs that drain them, come home and numb themselves with television, social media, alcohol. Anything to avoid the quiet voice that whispers in moments of stillness. This isn't the life you wanted. They silence that voice, because listening to it means admitting they've wasted years, maybe decades, building the wrong life. And that admission is so painful most people choose to keep sleeping until death finally wakes them. But there are the other 5, the ones who hear the voice and listen. The ones who risk everything to live honestly instead of comfortably. The ones who would rather fail at being themselves than succeed at being someone else. Marcus met one of them by accident. His name was David, 42 years old, former corporate lawyer who quit at the height of his career to become a woodworker. They met at a coffee shop. Marcus was reading the newspaper. David sat at the next table, sketching furniture designs in a worn notebook. They started talking. Small talk first, then deeper. What do you do? Marcus asked. I make furniture. For a living? For a life? The answer struck Marcus as strange. He asked what David meant. David closed his notebook, looked at Marcus directly. I spent 15 years building a career that made me successful and miserable. I had everything the world told me to want. Partnership at a law firm. 6-figure salary, respect. And the first wanted to drive my car into a wall every morning on the way to work. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Recognition. David continued. One day I was defending a corporation that had poisoned a water supply. We won. I got a bonus. And that night, I sat in my apartment and realized I was using my one life, my only life, to help people I didn't respect, do things I didn't believe in. For money, I didn't need to buy things I didn't want. I quit the next week. And now, Marcus asked, now, the first wake up at 5 a.m. because I want to, not because I have to. I work with my hands. I create things that last. I make less money and I've never been happier. Marcus stared at his cold coffee. But what if you'd failed? What if you'd failed? What if the furniture business didn't work? David smiled. Then the first would have failed at something I chose. That's still better than succeeding at something I didn't. They talked for 2 hours. When Marcus left, he felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Not happiness, disturbance. Because David had said out loud the thing Marcus had spent 40 years trying not to think. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He looked at his wife, breathing softly beside him. He loved her. But had he chosen her? Or had he chosen the idea of marriage because that's what 25-year-olds were supposed to do? He thought about his kids. He loved them. But had he wanted to be a father? Or had he wanted to check the box marked successful family man? He thought about his job. 43 years. Had any of it mattered? Had he ever done work that meant something beyond a paycheck? The questions were torture, because the answer to all of them was the same. He didn't know. He'd never asked. He'd simply followed the script. And now at 68 he was standing at the end of a life he'd never consciously chosen. The next morning, Marcus went back to the coffee shop, hoping to find David. He wasn't there. Marcus returned every Saturday for a month before he saw him again. "I need to ask you something," Marcus said. "How did you know? How did you know it was time to change?" David thought for a moment. "There's a question I started asking myself every morning. If the first died today, would I be proud of how I spent my time? For years the answer was no. One day, I realized if I kept living the same way, the answer would still be no at 60, 70, 80. So the first changed the way I was living." Marcus felt the weight of that, but the first am 68 of that. "I don't have time to start over." David leaned forward. "You're 68. You have maybe 10, 15, 20 years left. Are you going to spend them the same way you spent the last 40? Or are you going to spend them living?" Marcus wanted to argue, to list all the reasons why it was too late. The mortgage, the responsibilities, the expectation. But sitting across from David, those reasons felt hollow. They were just new versions of the same excuses he'd been making since he was 25, and they'd cost him his life. There's a concept in philosophy called bad faith. Sartre wrote about it. It's when you lie to yourself about your freedom. You tell yourself you have no choice. That circumstances control you. That you're trapped by obligations, responsibilities, other people's needs. But bad faith is a lie, because at every moment you're choosing. You choose to stay in the job you hate. You choose to maintain relationships that drain you. You choose to keep living the script. The system wants you to believe you're trapped. Because trapped people are predictable. They work, they consume, they don't disrupt. But the uncomfortable truth is, you've never been trapped. You've been afraid. Afraid of judgment, afraid of failure, afraid of disappointing people who have their own scripts they're trying to force onto you. And that fear has cost you the only thing you actually own, your life. Marcus started small. He took a pottery class, something he'd always been curious about but never pursued because it wasn't practical. The first time he sat at the wheel, hands covered in clay, shaping something with no purpose beyond the joy of creation, he cried, not from sadness, from recognition. This was what being alive felt like. Not performing, not achieving. Just doing something because it made him feel present in his own existence. He was terrible at pottery. His bowls were lopsided. His vases collapsed. But for the first time in 40 years, he didn't care about being good. He cared about being engaged. His wife noticed the change. "You seem different," she said one night. "I am," Marcus replied. "How?" He thought about how to explain it. "I've spent my whole life trying to be the person I thought I was supposed to be. I'm tired. I want to find out who I actually am before I die." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said something that surprised him. "I've been waiting for you to wake up." They stayed up until 3 a.m. talking. Really talking. Not about bills or schedules or what the kids were doing. About dreams they'd abandoned. Fears they'd never voiced. The life they'd built together that had become a beautiful cage. She admitted she felt it too. The emptiness. The sense that they were living correctly, but not authentically. They made a decision that night. They would spend the rest of their lives, however long that was, actually living. Marcus retired at 69. Not to do nothing but to do everything he'd postponed. He and his wife sold their house, bought a small RV, and started traveling. Not to tourist destinations, to places they were curious about. They volunteered at a wildlife sanctuary in Montana. They took a cooking class in New Orleans. They spent a month in a small town in Oregon learning woodworking from David, who had become a friend. People thought they were crazy. You're too old to be gallivanting around the country. What about stability? What about your retirement plan? Marcus smiled at these questions now, because he finally understood. Stability is what you're offered in exchange for your life. And he'd already paid that price for 43 years. He wasn't paying it anymore. At 72, Marcus was healthier and happier than he'd been at 52. Not because his circumstances were better, because his life was finally his. He woke up every day with purpose. Not the purpose the world had assigned him. The purpose he'd chosen, and that made every single day feel like something worth experiencing instead of something to survive. One afternoon, sitting by a lake in Vermont, his wife reading beside him, Marcus thought about the man he'd been at 68. Sitting in his backyard, coffee going cold. Feeling nothing. He didn't hate that man. He understood him. That man had done what he thought he was supposed to do. He'd followed the rules. And the rules had led him to a life that looked successful and felt empty. But here's what Marcus learned. It's never too late to stop living someone else's life and start living yours. The system will tell you otherwise. Your age, your responsibilities, your lack of resources, all reasons to stay in the cage. But those reasons are just fear wearing a disguise. And if you listen to them, you'll wake up at 78, 88, 98, and the emptiness will still be there. Because you can't fill the void of unlived life with comfort. You can only fill it by living. Marcus started writing letters to his younger self. Not to send, just to process. In one letter, he wrote this. You spent 40 years building a life that wasn't yours. You were afraid of disappointing people who would have forgotten you a week after you died. You traded your one irreplaceable life for approval from a world that doesn't care if you exist. You were a coward, but it's not too late. You still have time. Stop performing. Start living. The world will judge you either way. You might as well be judged for being yourself. He never sent the letters, but writing them helped him forgive the man he'd been and become the man he wanted to be. At 75, Marcus was asked to speak at his grandson's college graduation. He almost declined. What did he have to say to young people starting their lives? But his grandson insisted. So Marcus stood in front of 3,000 graduates and their families and said this. You're about to enter a world that will try to tell you who to be, what job to take, what life to build, what success looks like. And if you listen, you'll spend the next 40 years building a life that makes everyone else comfortable and makes you empty. I know, because I did it. I wasted 4 decades being the person I thought I was supposed to be, and the first almost died without ever meeting who I actually was. Don't do what I did. Don't wait until you're 68 to start living. Because here's the truth nobody tells you at 22. The world doesn't need another person following the script. The world needs you. The real you. The one you're afraid to be because it doesn't fit the mold. That's the only you worth being. Everything else is just slow death with a paycheck. The speech was not well received by the administration. Too dark, too discouraging. But afterward, 60 students approached Marcus. They thanked him. Some were crying. One young woman said, I've been accepted to law school, but I want to be a painter. Everyone says I'm throwing my life away. Marcus looked at her. The only way to throw your life away is to live it for someone else. Go paint. She hugged him. 6 months later, she sent him a photo of her first gallery show. The card said, Thank you for permission to live. Marcus is 80 now. He still travels. Still makes pottery. Still wakes up every morning, grateful to be alive instead of resentful that he has to be. He thinks often about the 95, the ones still sleeping, still performing, still building lives that look right and feel wrong. He wishes he could wake them up. but he knows he can't. Because waking up is a choice, and most people would rather stay comfortable in the dream than face the terror and freedom of being awake. Now, let me ask you something. You've made it this far in this video. That means something in you recognizes the pattern. Maybe you're 25 and just starting to feel the cage forming. Maybe you're 45 and you've been numb for so long you forgot what feeling alive was like. Maybe you're 65 and you're wondering if it's too late. Here's the truth. The system wants you to believe you have no choice. That your age, your obligations, your circumstances have locked you into the life you're living. But that's a lie. You're choosing this life every single day, and you can choose differently. Start with one question. If you died today, would you be proud of how you spent your time? Not proud in the eyes of your parents, your boss, your friends. Proud in your own eyes? If the answer is no, then you have two options. Keep living the same way and hope the answer changes. Or change the way you're living. It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow and buy an RV. But you do have to start one small choice toward the life you actually want, instead of the life you think you're supposed to have. Take the class. Have the conversation. Admit the truth you've been avoiding. Because every day you wait is another day you're not living. And you don't have an infinite number of those. Marcus would tell you this if he were here. You're going to die. That's the only certainty. The question is whether you're going to live first. Really live. Not perform. Not achieve. Not impress. Just exist honestly, as the person you actually are, instead of the person the world told you to be. That's the difference between the 95 and the 5. The 95D without living. The 5 live before they die. Which one are you going to be? Comment below one thing you've been postponing because it doesn't fit the script. One thing you'd do if you weren't afraid of judgment. Because naming it is the first step to claiming it. And claiming your life back is the only thing that actually matters.